It's a project which aspires to rewrite the story of inclusive education in the field of higher education.
This whole project is about defining what inclusivity means in education and what access means to education, or for all that matters, not having access.
I think ECOS is a very important project because we are learning and sharing experiences on how to become more inclusive. How are we embracing all those students from all over the world and trying to create a healthy environment, but also learning from those experiences.
So what I'm really interested in is the different stories about inclusive education in the different contexts and why they are so very different. For instance, each institution has completely different stories about inclusive education. So in the Czech Republic, they have a different story, in Slovakia. So I'm very interested in why these differences are there, but also what the envision of change is and the trajectory of change. And I'm very interested in, so what I would like to do is, I'm a researcher, so basically ask the unexpected questions. And also, I think inclusive education is more about us than about them, because ultimately there is no them. To unpack at each time when there isn't them sort of comes up, like this process of othering, like where is our role in that? How are we responsible?
As an outcome of the project, we are aiming to contribute a new online course addressing the professionalization of inclusive education within academia. We are coming together, bringing together different universities from different parts of the world. So together, these institutions are working on maybe how we can think of professionally looking at within the world of higher education and academia, how do we rethink about inclusive education? So broadly, that's what we are working on.
From my point of view, we are still lacking the inclusion of other epistemologies, of other methodologies. How do we create knowledge? What other knowledges can we consider as part of our academia? Also, I think ISS is still way behind in terms of including other bodies with disabilities. So I think there's still a room to learn from other institutions and from other realities. How can we be more inclusive in that sense?
I'm kind of a researcher, and the story is the most important part of my research, and I think it's the best way to improve something when we talk about it and when we open the topic and when we listen to each other and listen to each other's stories, because the story has the strength. I believe that I can learn more and more about people who I have no chance meet like in everyday life, and that they can not just inspire me, but they can surprise me, that I can be also friend and not just in a work way. We are very maybe different cultures, maybe very different people, but also very similar, and we've got a similar goal, maybe the same goal. Inclusion and equality is on the top of that way, and I hope that we can bring some new and fresh air, to the Czech Republic and to the topic of inclusion, and maybe Netherlands people can do the same.
We can communicate, lead discussions with students and see what they need, what they actually need, not what we think they need.
So I've been interviewing some students at our university, and I think 10 out of 12 were like, oh, I'm happy when I'm graduating. It's like, that means you want to leave. So instead of, oh, I never want to leave here, I want to learn more, I want to engage more, I want to be I want to actually then pursue a PhD or whatever possibility there might be to engage in research and education more. Like, where's that? And I think we're all too boxed in a particular way of doing education, and that's why we need to undo education. And it starts with the so-called authority of the teacher. And I've seen it a lot. I've seen people drop out, be discouraged, be excluded because they were not respected and valued on an equal footing. And also, if you say like, maybe they were right, I don't think even there is a particular right or wrong. If we have that encounter, and I see education as a relationship and thus as an encounter of two subjects. I mean, I'm only a teacher in relationship to a student, and therefore the student is also the teacher in that relationship. And I think if we talk about it in that way, you can only challenge each other from the knowledge that you create together, and there is no particular right or wrong knowledge in that regard.
We are also working towards an outcome of a student-led art exhibition, and finally also we are this documentary, which is a sort of detailing of the work which is done during the project, as part of the project.
I would say, as like a student as well as like a researcher, I'm very much bringing in that perspective of being able to see something from both sides, and I'm noticing how it's valued more. If we're talking about testing, I'm able to look at it from like a perspective of having given workshops alongside of teachers, and as well as a student who's still testing and who realizes what's beneficial and what isn't. So I feel like it's very valuable to myself as well as hopefully for others.
I see my role as someone that can offer a different perspective because we all have different lived experiences. Like, for example, you could box me and Kinza together because she's a hijabi, I'm a hijabi, we're born and raised here in Holland, but that doesn't, and we're both people of color, but it doesn't mean that we have the same experiences and we view things differently as well. To be very honest, it's to show people that within these boxes that they put up, that there are nuances within them, because Glenn and I were both Black, but we look at things differently. Kinza and I are both Muslim women, they look at things differently. So it's nice for people that are embarking on this journey and don't know anything to see that, you know, we're not a monolith in any way. So I think that's it, perspectives.
I think I recently, actually, I think just yesterday, I was talking to a friend who also does research. And she says that you have to do, you will find your work in whatever makes you angry. And I think, yeah, and that's kind of what happened here, right? Within this institution, I noticed there were so many things that inadvertently or advertently disadvantage students and privilege others, but it doesn't have to be that way. That education doesn't have to be designed that way. So I hope to add on to or build on to what I said before, kind of gain a broader appreciation of the breadth of experiences, but also the things that I am severely disconnected from, but from knowing that all forms of oppression are linked and also all forms of liberation then must also be linked. If I'm gonna look at the way oppressions exist and I experience them, I have to look at what other forms of oppression do not affect me, so I can incorporate that as well, so we can achieve liberation for all.
Vzdělání by mělo být přístupné každému. Bohužel ale víme, že tomu tak nemusí být vždy. Ve společnosti existují skupiny obyvatel, které od kvalitního vzdělání mohou dělit bariéry. Ať už jsou to specifické potřeby, etnicita, jazyk, kultura, pohlaví, věk nebo sociální prostředí. Online kurz Changing Our Story, The Pursuit of Inclusive Education nabízí prostředky, jak zvyšovat míru inkluze ve vysokoškolském vzdělání, tím bourat ony pomyslné bariéry a vytvářet prostředí otevřené všem. Klíčovou technikou bude v případě našeho kurzu takzvaný storytelling, neboli vyprávění příběhů.
And one of the tools is to share the story, and I'm really grateful that you have decided to come here. Maybe you can be also the ones who can share what was happening in Slovakia.
We want to avoid or eliminate violence on the women.
It could be very difficult for people who don't speak Slovakian. The conversation should move from the immediate responses or actions we can do to larger structural changes we can bring in the sector of education.
Kurs je určen vysokoškolské obci, studujícím i široké veřejnosti se zájmem o tématiku inkluzivního vzdělávání. Během kurzu zjistíme, co to vlastně inkluze je a co už není. Jak se k ní přistupuje ve střední Evropě a jak v Holandsku. Jak využívat storytelling k odkrývání příběhů a vytváření těch nových. A nakonec prozkoumáme různé přístupy k posilování inkluze na vysokých školách.
Part of this project is that we are developing an online course. And this is an online course to help people in particular institutions, but also beyond, to become more skilled in providing in creating inclusive, learning environments. I've chosen storytelling something that I use, but also because everybody can relate to stories, especially if you want to be international. I found the easiest way to approach it is to work with this concept of story.
My name is Pavla Hrabačková. I am from the Czech Republic, from the University of West Bohemia. I do also counseling for students with special needs. I will be involved in the course. I am in touch in specialists at our university and in our region who agreed to cooperate with us. We talk to them a lot. And what's very important for me is that we, through this project, could start the discussion at the university about the inclusion, which helps us a lot.
I have been teaching for more than 40 years. I would say that probably to accept new things in education, new trends, new methods, which enable to educate or to grow up really good persons for the society, for the life.
Because of a lot of what we're trying to achieve is kind of incongruent with the system and the institution as it functions. The two can not usually coexist in a synergetic way. I'm hoping to find ways where we can actually effectuate those changes and find concrete ways that we can implement interventions or solutions or ideas that actually do make the conditions and the circumstances for students, no matter where you're from, how you're studying, what your background looks like, who you are, so that you can actually have a valuable experience here at this institution.
My understanding of inclusion is it is the act of bringing together people from different backgrounds, people from different parts of the world into one social structure and making sure that they're not only physically there, but that their voices, their opinions are being heard, are being respected, and are being taken seriously.
I understand inclusion as this principle that looks to ensure that historically oppressed groups gets to have a voice in order to create a greater society. Then for me, inclusion is about social justice, but it's also about common good and community.
I generally understand inclusion to mean making the people who are supposed to be affected by an outcome of a given circumstances, either policy or administrative procedures, to get involved from at the initiation of the creation of what's supposed to happen in the future.
So I think the institutions have confused the concept of inclusion with diversity. We see few people of color or few non-binary people in an institution and we think that's inclusion. And that confusion on diversity has overshadowed the true meaning of inclusion in my perspective. Inclusion for me is about the political and social influence and value of historically and socially and structurally marginalized epistemologies.
I see that ISS is putting a lot of efforts into inclusion and into diversity, and I've seen like with the social action committees and stuff like that are calling for different causes. I see that actually the institution is trying so hard to make sure that students can have an opinion and an agency to choose how to be included. However, I think this remains like a lot of students might take a step back, and that can be because they feel like they're insecure about their English language skills, they're insecure about their preconceived cultural conceptions that other people might see as backwards or are seen as not Western enough. So I think that a lot of people might not feel included at ISS even if they try to be.
For me, education is a tool to create a more fair society and a more equitable society, and to develop these solidarity bonds within communities. And these inclusivity policies are actually being guided by the meritocratic principle, in which you just award some individuals in order to benefit them so they can advance in their professional careers in a really individualistic way.
I have seen that there are various student committees where students meet to discuss what ISS is supposed to do, but I consider that at this stage to be like a recognition. But how are those voices actually being enforced, and how ISS can ensure that other vulnerable groups, for example, people with learning difficulties, either through hearing or visual, can get included into the general overall policy of ISS, into the programming?
I think ISS is extremely diverse. Is it inclusive? Not necessarily. And I'll back it up by giving examples again from when we were studying here. ISS still falls under the larger structure of academia, which requires you to function in a particular way, which requires you to follow particular Harvard methods or these methods or that method of referencing. So what it does is like, we'll include you, but let us first teach you our ways, and then you can be included in our space.
One is looking at the existing policy, looking at the existing programs, and looking at how other people are doing it, and looking at what is lacking and how to bring that into a real existence or real frame of the ISS.
I feel that ISS should change their admission criteria in order to not only ensure that the students that come here advance in their professional academic careers in an individual way, but also to ensure that they are really committed with the development of their communities and with the development of the issues of their people.
During the orientation week, the first orientation week, maybe the dialogue between new students from new parts of the world can be more strong and can be more institutionalized and more structuralized to make sure that people actually get to know each other. And third of all, making sure that the creation of safe spaces is on the ground and holding people who run those safe spaces accountable and making sure that as many students can join as much as possible.
Well, it's a much larger structural change where the structures have to accept the, again, talking about epistemological differences of people that are coming from these diverse backgrounds, these diverse lived realities. And my suggestion would be, can you normalize a trans rector of ISS with all their glory, with all their identical understanding, and not because they are a trans person, but as an academic, they are just brilliant and they can run ISS as a rector.
Moc vás tady vítám na dnešní vernisáži výstavy Changing Our Story. Jedno obrovské téma, které je nám nějakým způsobem všem, bych řekla, společné a rezonuje naší společností a naším vzdělávacím systémem a tím tématem je inkluze. Výstava pracuje s osobními příběhy a s osobní zkušeností nebo se zkušeností z blízkého okolí.
Na tady výstavě Changing Our Story jsem se podílela jako designérka vizuálního stylu výstavy. Spojení barev a linií nebo rukou, které jsou vlastně jako pomocní ruce každému tomu člověkovi, který neměl tu pomoc, když ji potřeboval.
S mými díly tak já v podstatě jsem se zaměřil, co se týče asexuality, na to, co to je a vlastně o problematice, co se týče diskriminace a sexuality ve společnosti.
Ty výstavy představují svoje litografické práce, což je to tisk z kamene. A ty práce povědí o takovém stavu, jak odpojení, disociace a vlastně jakoby jak člověk to zažívá, jak to prožívá a jaké má to odstíny.
Pro mě pojem inkluze znamená otevřenost, nebát se, mluvit svou pravdu, své myšlenky v prostředí, které přijímá, i když nesouhlasí.
A prostě jenom pochopit, že jako ty lidi jsou tady přítomní, jenom zažívají trošku něco jiného a že jako je prostě trošku horší se adaptovat, ale jenom prostě, aby bylo pochopený, že co prožívají. A že jakoby ten život zvládají jenom trošku jiným způsobem.
Pojem inkluze pro mě vlastně znamená rovnost, národnost, orientace, nějaký poruchy učení nebo jakoby status v té společnosti.
No, inkluze pro mě znamená být začleněna společností a jelikož jsem v dětství nebyla začleněna společností, tak to je vlastně pro mě takový jakoby důležitý téma. A proto jsem byla i ráda, že jsem mohla být součástí toho projektu a této výstavy.
To slovo, co pro mě znamená, tak najspíš to akceptování lidí takovými, jakými oni jsou.
Moje meno je Dominika a súčasťou tohto projektu som úplne od začiatku. Zúčastnila som sa všetkých 3 letných škôl. Prvá bola v Hagu, druhá bola v Pilseni a tretia bola tu u nás v septembri na Slovensku. Tento projekt je zameraný hlavne na inklúziu a som veľmi rada, že som mohla byť súčasťou. Na prvej letnej škole v Hagu, ktorá bola zameraná hlavne na ľudí, ktorí nemajú potrebné dokumenty, aby mohli opustiť krajinu, sme spoločne s nimi strávili veľmi veľa času formou storytellingu, kde sme diskutovali po skupinkách, vymieniali sme sa na rôznych miestach a rozprávali nám svoje životné príbehy. Ďalšou takou časťou bolo, že sme mali vymýšľať básničky a potom spoločne sme si ich odprezentovali, mali sme pripraviť kresbu a táto básnička mala byť zameraná na nás, na to, ako my vnímame inklúziu, čiže celý tento projekt sa niesol v tom, že sme spoznávali kultúru danej krajiny, spoznávali sme rôznych ľudí. Neboli to teda iba ľudia, ktorí nemali potrebné papiere, ale boli to ľudia, ktorí boli bez domova. Boli sme sa pozrieť v takej jednej veľkej komunite, kde žijú ľudia, ktorí si nemôžu dovoliť zaplatiť bývanie, alebo jednoducho boli to opustené matky s deťmi. A takou ďalšou časťou, ktorú sme zažili v Hagu, tak bolo vždy, že do obeda sme sa stretli na škole a sme zdieľali svoje príbehy. A pre mňa najzaujímavejšou časťou toho celého projektu, ktorý bol v Holandsku, bolo, že na začiatku týždňa sme dostali foťák a mali sme možnosť vytvoriť 10 fotiek, ktoré predstavovali nejakú inklúziu a na konci sme si ich spoločne odprezentovali a spoločne pozreli.
Dobrý deň, vážené dámy, vážení páni, milí hostia. Dovolte mi, aby som vás pripísala na dnešnej vernistáži Holandskej výstavy projektu THUAS názvom Changing Our Story. Projekt vlastne ponúka aplikáciu inkluzívnych spôsobov do vzdelávania, najmä prostredníctvom metódy storytellingu sa zapojené inštitúcie snažia vlastne zmeniť ani inklúzie vo svojom prostredí.
Aj keď sa ti to nezdá, Ahojte, moje meno je Andrea, som súčasťou tiež tohto projektu a zúčastnila som sa všetkých 3 letných škôl. Ja vám však idem porozprávať o jednej letnej škole, ktorá sa uskutočnila priamo v Plzni, kde sme sa venovali viacerým tematikám a problematikám. Počas prvého dňa sme sa venovali najmä univerzite a tomu, ako tam funguje inkluzívne vzdelávanie študentov, ktorí majú teda viaceré problémy, a diskutovali sme teda hlavne o tom, ako im univerzita pomáha študovať napriek týmto problémom a zvládaním tieto problémy. Potom sme sa venovali napríklad aj študentom, ale aj celkovo ľuďom v Plzni, ktorí prišli z Ukrajiny. Konkrétne nám o tom rozprával jeden študent, ktorý sa teda týmto ľuďom venuje a poskytol nám trošku takú inú perspektívu a iný pohľad na túto problematiku. Takisto sme navštívili aj neziskovú organizáciu Tady a teď. Tá sa konkrétne zameriava na deti a ľudí, ktorí majú viaceré finančné problémy, napríklad dôsledkom toho, že sa ocitli v exekúciách. Takže takisto sme riešili, ako vlastne táto nezisková organizácia pomáha týmto ľuďom, ktorí majú teda aj takéto problémy. Pre mňa najprínosnejšie bolo asi to, že sme sa z Plzne neskôr presunuli na jeden deň do Prahy a absolvovali sme prechádzku alebo takú prehliadku po Prahe, ktorá bola sprevádzaná jednou ženou, ktorá počas svojho života žila na ulici, ktorá nám teda rozprávala o tom, ako týmto ľuďom bez domova pomáha samotné mesto a rôzne neziskové organizácie. Ona napríklad mala aj skúsenosť s tým, že mala problémy s drogami, takže nám rozprávala celý svoj životný príbeh, ako tomu my hovoríme storytelling. A pre mňa osobne to bolo veľmi prínosné a zaujímavé, pretože som nikdy priamo nestretla a nemala kontakt s osobou, ktorá mala takúto skúsenosť. A takisto nám rozprávala aj o tom, ako napríklad funguje zdravotná starostlivosť, ktorá je teda realizovaná iba v parku pri stanici a že vlastne ako títo ľudia majú možnosť sa dostať k takejto starostlivosti.
Začala tá vojna, tak prvé 2 mesiace boli také, že veľmi súdržné, že ešte ľudia boli takí, že jasné, pomôžeme všetko. S tými nevýhodami Slovákov, tak aj tu sa hovorí, že Ukrajinci tu robia teda za najmenej, akože majú najmenšie platy. Kde ich nezamestnávajú, a keď ich zamestnávajú, tak sú to presne také tie podradné roboty.
Takže v rámci poslednej letnej školy na Univerzite Konštantína Filozofa v Nitre sme sa venovali hlavne témam a problematikám, ktoré sú veľmi dôležité na slovenskej spoločnosti. A celým týmto heslom vlastne našej letnej školy bolo to, že na to, aby sme porozumeli, tak musíme najskôr počúvať ostatných. A v rámci teda tejto letnej školy sme využívali rôzne techniky, hlavne storytelling, ktorý bol založený na tom, že sme práve chceli použiť rôzne príbehy skutočných ľudí a naozaj ich sprostredkovať a dať ich na svetlo ostatným ľuďom. V rámci tohto sme navštívili počas letnej školy v Nitre Orechov dvor, ktorý slúži ako komunita rómskych občanov, kde sme sa teda venovali hlavne problematike inklúzie a integrácie rómskych detí vo vzdelávaní. V rámci tohto projektu sme sa rozprávali takisto ako aj so sociálnymi pracovníkmi, tak aj s rôznymi odborníkmi, s ktorými sme práve riešili túto inklúziu a teda ako zakomponovať alebo dať väčší priestor rómskym deťom vo vzdelávaní. Zároveň sme sa rozprávali aj o tom, aké možnosti majú rómske deti alebo teda rómske komunity, čo všetko pre nich predstavuje ich bežný deň. A v rámci tohto projektu sme sa taktiež zameriali aj na komunitu LGBTI. Tým, že vlastne na Slovensku je táto komunita veľmi často znevažovaná a od posledného útoku, ktorý sa stal v roku 2022 v teplárni v podniku v Bratislave, sme sa rozhodli toto miesto navštíviť a porozprávať sa na tému inklúzie LGBTI komunity na Slovensku. Aké hrozby to pre nich predstavuje, s čím sa stretávajú denne v ich životoch a ako vidia budúcu inklúziu v rámci slovenskej komunity, alebo teda života na Slovensku. Na záver sme sa taktiež venovali aj našim ukrajinským občanom, a teda ukrajinským študentom, ktorí prišli z Ukrajiny sa vzdelávať na našu univerzitu. Ako koniec tejto letnej školy sme rozoberali inklúziu študentov, ktorí majú nejaké zdravotné alebo mentálne znevýhodnenia. A na záver sme chceli vlastne vytvoriť jeden veľký projekt, ktorým sme vlastne aj ukončovali našu letnú školu v Nitre. A tento projekt bol založený na tom, že sme interpretovali nami vytvorenú pieseň, ale v posunkovej reči.
This whole project is about defining what inclusivity means in education and what access means to education, or for all that matters, not having access. I see that very specifically with the group that I work with, undocumented people, but exclusion is in many parts. What I find very interesting is that in the exchange with other partners from other parts of the world, it seems that we are all very busy in finding out what is inclusion and how can we support it and how can we learn from each other in that sense.
Usually here in Slovakia we have like 30 or even more pupils in one classroom, or 35. And if, for example, 10 or 15 of them have special needs, it's very difficult to manage the education process. And it was really challenging. And sometimes I got really frustrated because the differences and the special educational needs were not accepted by the teachers. Like they were coming to me and they were telling me like these children are not supposed to be in this school. This is school for normal children, and this was something which I can't understand, how a teacher who should accept everything and love children the way they are. They wanted to separate them and to put them in some special schools.
By meeting our colleagues in The Hague and from Slovakia, we have learned that there are other issues that we are not dealing with them. Maybe we are not even thinking about them enough or in a very different way.
There are many different expectations, or not really different, but rather kind of multi-layered expectations coming from different partners. Immediately after realizing this, we decided to somehow build the course on the freedom of choice. Where to start? Either it's someone who somehow hears about the topic of inclusion at the universities for the very first time, or maybe it's a person who's been teaching for a long time, or he or she is working in counseling center and they already have some experience with the topic.
What really helped us during the project in changing the stories were the students, because they were involved during summer schools, they made art exhibitions, and their stories were very important for the institutions and for all the partners of this project. How did you experience the students' voice and participation of the students?
I really believe it was one of the vital parts of the project to work with students, to let them express what they need, what they would like the changes to be, to share their experience, their stories with their student counterparts in other countries. Because when you share a story, it leads to a change. Even listening to a story of someone else, it has some influence and some impact on you, and your story is different after hearing that.
We did kind of a statement that for us, this is an important topic which we want to kind of open and develop. It might be like a hard journey, but it's necessary to take this path, basically.
So this project has served as a kind of door opener, especially in Central Europe, but not only in the Netherlands, I guess, as well, like food you put in the door.
And we just now believe or hope we will continue in this journey.
Here in Slovakia, think, and we always complain that this is like the financial issues, the economic issues, that we don't have money to make the schools more inclusive. And since we are in this project, I realized the money is not the most important thing, that we have to change ourselves and the way we are thinking.
I think that's where we need to go. We need to really find that space of, okay, now I don't know anymore, and let's figure it out anew together. I think we have so much to learn. Also, even though we may have a very good idea about inclusion, the practice really needs a lot of work. And I think today we also talked about action, and I think that's where we also can step up a lot. So
we hope that together we can help create a new learning environment, and that would help us to how to address the challenges in the area of inclusion in higher education, how to take a few steps forward, how to understand what's our current situation, and how do we, different people, how as part of academia, how do we actually recognize inclusion, think about it together, and then take a few steps together to move forward.
So I want to learn how to actually change situations in classrooms without having to be present every time to be able to be that change. I want someone else to actually basically transfer that change to them and to have it become like a cycle of change, if that makes sense.
And sometimes you just need a mirror. Sometimes you just need an outsider to tell you what you are thinking from the inside.